Dejanay Carrington is looking around the room like, oh my God, I've never been in this much fire. I mean, it's getting so bad that now her endorsements are potentially about to pull out on representing Dejanay Carrington.
This just goes to show that Dejanay has no self-awareness in what's going on. Dejanay Carrington runs on threads immediately. White privilege at Indiana Fever. White privilege. You running around with blonde hair. It looked like you trying to be white. It looked like you trying to be a white girl. What are you talking about, white privilege? The white girl just got a technical foul for something she didn't even do. What are you talking about, white privilege, bro? This is why she should be banned from the league. They always run.
It states here, Reebok is reportedly dropping their endorsement for Dejanay Carrington after she attacked Sophie Cunningham last.
Did y'all see what happened when this young lady got ejected from a WNBA game the other day for a flagrant foul on Sophie Cunningham? Did y'all see that? She got ejected from the game for that flagrant foul right there. And I'll be damned if that wasn't a flagrant too. She mugged her. Damn near came across like decapitating her, for crying out loud. That was definitely a hard foul. Make no mistake about it. Nobody can argue about it. You can say what you want. We know what we saw. No way around it. The Johnny Carrington foul was clearly unnecessary. It was a flagrant foul penalty too. It was absolutely positively correct call. It was called the flagrant two. That's a flagrant two every single damn time in the NBA and the WNBA.
Late in the opening quarter of a nationally televised matchup featuring the Chicago Sky and Indiana Fever, Sophie Cunningham broke free in transition and headed toward what appeared to be a routine fast break finish. Carrington chased the play from behind, closed the gap, and made contact across Cunningham's head and neck area, knocking her violently toward the floor. The officials stopped the game and went to replay, where the contact was examined from multiple angles before the original ruling was elevated to a flagrant penalty too. That distinction matters because it is reserved for contact officials to determine crosses beyond ordinary basketball physicality into something unnecessary and excessive. The upgrade meant Carrington's night was finished immediately. She was thrown out of the game, and television cameras followed her as she left the floor. Her expression during that walk told its own story. Whether she agreed with the ruling or not, she appeared to understand that the play was not going to disappear quietly. But even then, the controversy was still recoverable. A hard foul, an ejection, some debate, maybe a fine. The moment had not yet become a reputation problem. That happened next.
Dejanay Carrington tweeted out white privilege from the locker room of a game that she was playing in. Get this. She fouled Sophie Cunningham hard. Sophie Cunningham, obviously a white person, fouls her hard. Flagrant two, gets ejected, goes to the locker room and tweets out white privilege in the middle of the game. Now here's the kicker to me. A flagrant two has to be contact that can lead to an injury that looks excessive. Dejanay, it was about as excessive as possible. If there was any evidence of there being white privilege, this was not it.
Now Carrington reached the point where she could either lower the temperature or pour gasoline on the entire situation, and almost immediately she chose the second path. Not long after being removed from the game, before the controversy had even settled, she posted the words white privilege on social media and tagged the Fever. There was no accompanying explanation laying out what she believed had happened, no detailed accusation, and no context telling people what exactly those words were supposed to reference. That ambiguity was especially explosive because Cunningham's name was already connected to a completely separate national conversation involving transgender athletes competing in women's sports. Then Carrington added another post highlighting the date of the next Sky Fever meeting and attached a smiling emoji. To supporters, maybe that was harmless competitive energy. To critics, it looked like she was deliberately escalating a situation that was already becoming combustible. Instead of creating distance between herself and the foul, she tied herself even more closely to the controversy and gave everyone watching something bigger than basketball to argue about.
I would actually say that this is black privilege, to be totally honest with you, because her posting this white racist comment right after assaulting Sophie Cunningham on the court is actually black privilege, because she knows the WNBA won't do a single thing of significance about it. And imagine if the roles were reversed. If Sophie made a comment similar to this, then she'd likely never play again. And actually, we just saw this from Coach Sandy Brondello. She got disciplined for making, I believe, a pretty innocent, maybe, offhand comment about talking about Angel Reese and saying that she's a protected species. She was suspended and disciplined. And I think if that's the standard, then DeJohnay should be too.
Consider how that sequence appeared from the outside. A player is tossed for a flagrant 2 after making heavy contact with an opponent's head and neck, and almost immediately afterward she uses one of the most politically and culturally charged phrases in public conversation without explaining what she means. Regardless of what Carrington intended, and regardless of the explanation she would later offer, millions of people were left to fill in the blank themselves. The obvious interpretation for many was that she was suggesting race somehow influenced the punishment she received from the officials. That is not a minor implication. If people believe you are accusing referees, the league, or anyone else involved of racial bias, the conversation instantly moves into much more serious territory. And once the public forms that first impression, repairing it becomes incredibly difficult. You can clarify later. You can say people misunderstood you. You can explain that the post referred to something else entirely, but the original message has already been screenshotted, reposted, debated, clipped, and transformed into a narrative. That is why the first statement matters so much when emotions are running high. Carrington left the meaning open, and everyone else rushed in to define it for her.
I'm just wondering, is this all some sort of bizarre PR strategy to attract eyeballs, or is the WNBA fundamentally broken?
No. That's you, because you're a good person trying to find some kind of rational reason for doing this other than what it is. It's pure and simple racism and hate. They're mad that the best player in the league is a heterosexual white woman. Let's just be honest. She's not one of the confidants in their creed. And so therefore it's been a concentrated effort to go after her. Even her head coach doesn't stand by. So, and I think it's hilarious, and at the same time, they don't know what a woman is. And I'm very proud of Freedom and the other gentlemen for finding out who they are. And I wish them the best. And hopefully the league will, since it's an all tolerant league and their head coaches wear shirts about trans women count. Well, here's 2. And I hope they give them their opportunity, and the young lady in France as well. So I think it's a league that has got away with being racist and disgusting to people. And now they're, Americans are smart to it. So hopefully they get some of their own, but I wouldn't let my daughters watch it.
Paying attention to what DeJohnay Carrington did to Sophie Cunningham, it was not a race-based decision. And to call that a white privilege-based foul is to completely undermine the term of white privilege and to also completely ignore the rules in basketball. You hit her in the head, you drew blood, you didn't connect with the ball at all whatsoever. So to me, it was just very ignorant and to some degree asinine by DeJohnay Carrington to suggest that that call was based on white privilege. Have we seen examples of white players make that same foul and get away with it? Yes. Have we seen examples of black players make that same foul and get away with it? Yes. There was no white privilege involved in that specific call. DeJohnay, you hit her in the head and you drew blood.
Every single game for the rest of the season counts. And the fact that she let her hate and her ego cost the game for her entire team is so toxic. It goes to show that she has very little respect for her teammates because they all work their absolute asses off. They've all got something to prove. They know that, they started the season with all this hype. They didn't kick it off very strong. And so they have all been working their asses off, coming together, playing patiently. When I say patiently, they've been playing patiently, learning how to actually run the court together. A lot of new pieces. There's been some injuries. There's been people returning from injury. There's been a lot of changes. The fact that they were just on the rise, and as a Fever fan, I can say they were actually schooling us in the first quarter. They came back when we were up 8 points. DeJohnay herself was bawling out, and she just cost the game for her teammates.
she posted white privilege after getting tossed from the game, but says it wasn't about the foul. Can you explain this?
No, I can't. When she tweeted white privilege, she did it so quickly, it was almost as though she had the phone in her pocket after this foul and she got ejected. So, I mean, to say she wasn't referring to this play or getting kicked out and saying that the only reason she got kicked out and it got upgraded is because Sophie Cunningham is white is crazy. It was a crazy thing to tweet, maybe crazier than to try to act like it had nothing to do with the play. So I have no idea what she's talking about. I don't think anybody can have any idea what she's talking about. Bizarre.
At the same time, Sophie Cunningham responded in almost the exact opposite fashion, and that contrast made Carrington's approach look even more chaotic. When Cunningham was asked about the controversy after Indiana's victory, she said she believed the league was handling the situation, rejected the idea that race belonged in the discussion, and pointed to a previous incident in which she herself had been ejected and believed the punishment was deserved. There was no extended rant, no social media battle, and no attempt to turn the moment into something larger. Cunningham essentially said the rules applied to her when she crossed the line, so she saw no reason to frame Carrington's punishment through race. Whether someone agrees with Cunningham's broader views or not, the communication difference was dramatic. One player delivered a short, direct response and moved forward. The other spent several days trying to explain increasingly controversial messages. That kind of contrast becomes important once the issue moves outside pure basketball. Sponsors, front offices, media departments, and teammates all care about how players function when scrutiny intensifies. By this point, the question was no longer simply who was right about one foul. It was also about which player appeared capable of staying composed while the spotlight got hotter. Cunningham looked settled. Carrington looked like she was still searching for the version of the explanation that would finally end the conversation.
Oh my God, it's getting real. It is getting very much real for in the field, for them pockets. That's what I like to see. Pockets getting hit hard, bro. Hard. Because somebody need to hold these players accountable for the stupidity they have been putting out. Because it has been a lot of stupidity. And to add even more insult to injury, thousands of people are calling for Reebok to drop their endorsement for DJ Carrington after she attacked Sophie Cunningham. Now, this was from earlier this morning.
And that leads directly into the part of the controversy that could affect Carrington financially. Reebok had signed her to a multi-year endorsement agreement the previous April, positioning her as an important piece of its renewed push into basketball and connecting her with the Engine sneaker campaign. At the time, the partnership made sense. Carrington was coming off a major rise in visibility, including most improved player recognition and all defensive first-team honors, and she appeared to be developing into one of the league's emerging commercial personalities. But once the Cunningham controversy exploded, fans began targeting Reebok's own social media pages with demands that the company end the relationship. Comments accused Carrington of delivering a cheap shot and then making matters worse with explanations that failed to convince critics. Pressure campaigns like that cannot simply be dismissed as random internet noise when they become large enough. Companies track sentiment around the athletes they pay to represent them, especially when a controversy starts appearing under unrelated promotional posts. When discussion about a signature athlete becomes dominated by calls to drop that athlete, the sponsor suddenly has to calculate whether the partnership is still helping the brand or forcing the brand to absorb a controversy it never intended to own.
But when black people do some foolishness, they got to be held accountable just like any other damn race. And I'm telling you right now, she need to be held accountable. So Reebok, stick it to her. Stick it to her. Because what she did was ruined a brand deal like no other. She ain't even all that on the basketball court anyways. Common sense would have told you not to clothesline Sophie Cunningham from hell. Because you want to know why? The backlash you're going to get from that decision will affect your pockets. And I'm so happy that these brands are now seeing what we've been seeing. A whole lot of BS going on from these players. And I'm telling you right now, more players need to lose brand deals when they do stupidity, especially to Caitlin Clark.
Reports then began circulating that Reebok was considering exactly the kind of drastic move angry fans had been demanding, with claims that the company could terminate its partnership with Carrington rather than remain attached to the growing controversy. If that ultimately happens, the significance goes well beyond one sponsorship check. Athlete endorsement agreements are not casual arrangements that major companies abandon without considering the consequences. Marketing campaigns are planned months in advance. Product launches, photo shoots, social posts, retail materials, and promotional budgets can all be built around a particular athlete. Money is committed before the public ever sees the campaign. That is why even the possibility of Reebok wanting immediate distance would signal just how toxic the company may believe the situation has become. A sponsor has to ask a very simple question. Does continuing the relationship create more value than risk? Every additional day an athlete dominates headlines for reasons unrelated to performance makes that calculation harder. Brands want their logos connected to highlights, personality, winning, and aspiration. They do not want their names repeatedly pulled into arguments about fouls, race, social media posts, and public backlash. Once the sponsor becomes part of the controversy, the athlete is no longer the only person managing reputational damage.
Dejanai Carrington, after getting thrown out of the game for her ridiculous foul on Sophie Cunningham, went to social media and claimed white privilege. To that, Emmanuel Acho basically pushed back and said you can't call everything white privilege. It undercuts the idea so many have talked about. And then Dejanai went to X and responded to Emmanuel Acho. He said, I never once claimed that the assessment of the foul was white privilege. That was your assumption. Try exercising your critical thinking skills. No, you studied psych. Furthermore, I'm the last thing from ignorant or asinine when it comes to speaking on white privilege. Do your research on that one. Actually went to school, one of the top universities, might I add, to educate myself on this exact subject. I would never use that term as a rhetorical weapon, knowing the historical and social weight it holds without having the proper evidence to substantiate it. So, in your face, Annual. What I want to know is, then why were you posting white privilege in the locker room immediately after being ejected? What were you randomly sitting in the locker room having just been ejected thinking about when you posted white privilege, and by the way, tagged the Indiana Fever?
Here is the central point that gets lost underneath all the noise. Almost none of the larger fallout was inevitable. Basketball produces flagrant fouls. Players miss time contests, hit opponents too hard, get thrown out, pay fines, apologize, and continue their seasons. Most of those incidents become forgotten clips within days. The contact itself was not what turned Carrington's week into a full-scale crisis. The escalation came afterward, the immediate white privilege post with no explanation, tagging the Fever, highlighting the next matchup with a smiling emoji, going after a nationally known critic rather than quickly clarifying what the original message meant, then appearing before reporters and still leaving basic questions unanswered. Every one of those decisions was voluntary. Nobody made her post while emotions were still fresh. Nobody forced her to challenge Acho's intelligence. Nobody required her to answer vaguely when a direct explanation might have ended part of the speculation. And if a sponsor is watching the pattern develop while deciding whether this athlete should continue representing its products, that pattern becomes more important than the original whistle. Companies do not sign players because they want to spend their time managing controversies. They sign players because they expect those athletes to strengthen the brand. Once the relationship starts generating questions the company never planned to answer, executives begin wondering whether the partnership still makes business sense.
Hey, the black girl, jail.
You need to go directly to jail. Immediately. No detours, no excuses, no stopping anywhere else first. You have to leave right now. Everything is going to be fine. Go on. Go. Straight to jail.
This is assault. Right? This is assault. Now let me tell you something. This is assault. She needs to go to jail. Premeditated. Go to jail. Go to jail. She needs to be arrested. Go to jail. I want her in jail. I want her in jail. She should never touch her. Nah, can't do it. All right, we already know the WNBA is in a position right now. You need to make an example of that Don Imus. That Don Imus needs to be made an example of. That Don Imus needs to be made an example of. She needs to go to jail for assaulting Miss Cunningham. She needs to go to jail immediately.
There is another possibility underneath the entire situation that critics have raised, and that is whether competitive resentment or jealousy helped intensify the hostility between these players. Cunningham has become one of the league's most visible personalities this season, generating national attention, building a massive online following, and repeatedly finding herself at the center of discussions that extend far beyond what happens during 40 minutes of basketball. Carrington, meanwhile, has produced strong stretches of play of her own, while receiving considerably less mainstream attention. When two competitors already have history, and one becomes a constant headline magnet, it is easy for fans to interpret every confrontation through the lens of personal tension. That does not prove jealousy caused the foul, and the play itself cannot establish what Carrington was thinking. But critics point to everything that happened afterward, the immediate social media messaging, the defensive exchanges, the continued escalation, and argue that the emotional reaction looked bigger than one mistimed basketball challenge. Whether that interpretation is fair or not, it now becomes part of the narrative Carrington has to carry, and the consequences can compound quickly. If a Reebok termination really happens, other companies considering future endorsement deals will notice. Front offices may ask whether the production is worth the media distraction. Road crowds now have a fresh reason to target her with boos. Teammates may have to answer questions about posts they never made, and controversies they never created. A situation that started with one fast break foul can suddenly follow an entire organization from arena to arena.
Now let's talk about black privilege for a second. Doing something completely wrong and unethical, and instead of taking responsibility, pulls out the race card and acts like a victim. Yeah, that's what we just witnessed here. The sheer lack of accountability on DeJournet's end, that was so intentional. Look at DeJournet staring at Sophie's head the whole time, and look at her reaction after. That's anger. A normal reaction would be to ask if Sophie was okay or immediately apologize. But instead she shoves her. The audacity to go and cry wolf and pull out the fake victim card and scream white privilege. All the while making Sophie Cunningham bleed as a result to her actions. People are tired of everything being blamed on race. I wouldn't be surprised if DeJournet did this in response to Sophie Cunningham coming out vocally in response to protecting women in women's sports. This was not white privilege. Under DeJournet's definition of white privilege, here's some more white privilege. Getting ejected from the game was called consequences to actions. And DeJournet should be thankful that an ejection is all that happened, because she ought to be suspended from the entire league.
Now compare the two responses once more. Cunningham has acknowledged that she has committed flagrant fouls before, been ejected, and accepted that she deserved the punishment. She did not use that previous moment to create a larger cultural fight. She absorbed the consequence and continued playing. That is the dividing line between one ugly night and a controversy that threatens to become attached to an athlete's career. Carrington kept the story alive through post after post, response after response, and explanation after explanation, until the conversation moved far beyond what happened on the court. That is ultimately the biggest lesson in this entire episode. Athletic ability can earn someone an endorsement contract, but discipline away from the game can determine whether the relationship survives. Carrington's talent has never been the central question. Her production, defensive impact, and accomplishments are already part of the record. The issue this week has been judgment under pressure. Professional athletes now operate in an environment where millions of people can instantly see every message, replay every interview answer, compare every contradiction, and preserve every impulsive post forever. Carrington did not create this crisis simply because one hard foul went wrong. The damage came from what followed, during multiple moments when she had the opportunity to cool everything down and instead kept the controversy moving. If the reported Reebok fallout becomes reality, the sponsorship will not be remembered as something lost because of one physical basketball play. It will be remembered as the consequence of everything that happened after it. And if Carrington does not change the way she handles the next major controversy, this week may eventually look less like the conclusion of the story and more like the first domino to fall.